Welcome to our Benita's Maternity Program Antenatal class. Today we're speaking with Sister Ingrid Groenewald, who will be chatting to us about baby development milestones. Welcome, Sister Ingrid.
So I often get, questions in the baby clinic and even in the antenatal classes, like, what are we supposed to do with our babies? What are you going to expect, especially if it's your first baby? You don't really know what to expect. How do babies get from being born, being newborn, to eventually being able to walk? It's actually mind-boggling to think that within 1 year, so many things happen and so many things develop. Okay, so what can you do and what can you expect basically of your little one? So for those of you who are still pregnant, we know that you can already start thinking about the baby development and start to even communicate and have an interaction with your baby just by rubbing your tummy and by talking to your baby. But then if we think, if your baby's born and if we think about a newborn, these little ones don't do a lot, hey? If we think that's so overwhelming, in the sense that so many things have changed for babies, but they are very immature. These human babies can't just get up and walk. They are very immature. They need to be looked after. So you need to cuddle your baby, carry your baby and feed your baby and everything. Your baby can't do anything for itself. Okay, so if we think about a newborn, if we started a newborn, if we think about vision even, babies can't see far. So if you have your newborn in your arms like this, if you're feeding your baby and you have your baby in your arms, that is about the distance that your baby can see. So even vision-wise, it's something that improves over time. And a lot of moms and dads don't specifically know how it changes. So for newborns, they can see this distance. So from the beginning, communication and touch, those two things are so important. So from the beginning, to really communicate by talking to your baby, lots of interaction, making eye contact with your baby, but know that for the first 6 weeks, the baby actually he's going to start looking at you and really focusing on you, and even by really looking in the face and at your face, and but there won't be any kind of specific interactions from his side or from her side with smiling and so on. That starts basically from about 6 weeks onwards. Okay, so for the first 6 weeks, I would say lots of touching, talking, cuddling. This is what your baby, that is also the security of your baby. Okay, but normally we tend to focus so much on the big things, like when is your baby going to start smiling, and the smiling I'll get to. But we tend to forget that there are other things developing as well. And just one thing I want to point out here, if we think about the taste buds, and if you think about something that's very sour, so if you think about a lemon even now, and you think that you must eat the lemon, immediately you have this, pulling in your mouth, and you can just already even taste this, where babies are born with only the sweet taste buds really developed. And this is really where breast milk comes in. Babies really taste that and they know what they're having, okay, because it's really delicious stuff. But then what happens is, as they grow older, they suddenly start tasting different things. And we can see this, that if you think about your baby at birth or in hospital, or if your baby gets the first, let's say the first polio drops, the vaccinations, one actually sees that babies don't normally tend to pull a face at all, because they don't really taste that. Polio is quite a bitter taste. So they don't really, pull a face. And then if they get a little bit bigger, and if they're at 6 weeks, if they get something, then you can start seeing that they actually start pulling a face a bit and think this is not the best thing to taste, but also not too bad. And basically a month later, so let's say around about 3 months or so, is where the other taste buds definitely have developed. And so if you need to give your baby any kind of medication, you actually see that they really pull a face. So there are also inside out of our bodies and inside of your baby, lots of different things that actually develop. Okay, so now what happens around about the 6 week mark, 6 to 8 weeks? This is the time that baby suddenly realizes he or she can start smiling. And a lot of parents might say, you know what, my baby started smiling at 3 weeks or at 4 weeks. And I suppose it is possible. We all have different times of development. But the majority of babies do start pulling their little faces into a smile, but it is a completely, it's not a real smile where there's eye contact. You know, the smiling that I'm talking about is some sort of interaction. So you're looking at your baby, there's eye contact with your baby. And because of this and the talking with your baby, that you actually have a reaction back, that your baby's starting to smile. Before that, it's just randomly looking into the air, and you actually can see the little smile forming on the face. And that is normally just practicing, really. It might be even like a wind that the baby is having, but you will definitely start noticing the difference once you have a baby that properly smiles to you, because there's interaction happening. Right, so that is normally around about let's say the 6 to 8 months, 8 weeks. So it's a 2-month period that you actually can start seeing this. Also very social, starting to really look at you. You know, if we think about the social development, that are really looking at you, and then, like I said, you know, the smile that actually develops. If we look at the language development, and if we talk about language development, happens basically from birth straight to talking. You know, as they grow older, they start to be able to do more different things with their mouth, with the tongue, and everything has to be learned. It's actually amazing to think that a baby is born and it's almost like a piece of white paper. It's a blank paper, okay? And everything has to be written on, everything has to be learned. So your baby's learning on the way, okay, as your baby's growing older. So if we're thinking about a 2-month-old with a language development, this is where little sounds are started to be made, all sorts of cooing sounds, and sometimes you might even see that the tongue is being pushed out the mouth. And this is by really interacting again. If you see your baby's awake and is really focusing on different things, this is the time to really interact with your baby by communicating with your baby. You can even start also by pushing your tongue out, and or by making a little this kind of, you know, facial expressing with your mouth, because this is your baby's going to really like focus in on this and even try by himself, you know, to do this. And this is really the mimicking that comes in. But definitely the big things here is the smile, you know, that interaction. And a lot of moms feel so good about that, because all the work and the effort that you're doing, and then suddenly you get this back, you get the smile back, that you think, oh, okay, if I didn't sleep well last night, one smile and all of that is fine, I can carry on. So it's really very rewarding if your baby starts interacting in this way. Then obviously also, if we think about cognitive development, and this is really the work, the learning and the thinking part, it's this by looking at the face, and actually it's almost like imprinting. Your baby's really focusing on your face and starts to know, this is mom, you know. So and also another thing that I also just want to point out here is that the smell development is really good. So babies can smell really good, so they know exactly if you're in the room, this is mommy. Especially if you're breastfeeding, your baby knows you there, because your baby can even smell the smell of breast milk. Movement here is that if you think about a newborn, you know, their neck control, you have to hold and support the neck for these small babies. But around about 2 weeks, you can actually start to hold your baby like this, and the neck is actually fairly strong and starting to be quite strong. What I can suggest at this point, and really from a newborn, is to do some tummy time, where you put your baby on the tummy with the little arms to the front and the head pointed to the side. And then you'll see, as a newborn, they don't do a lot. They just lie like this. But as they get to 2 months, they definitely start to really pick up the head. And this is really good exercise. It's great exercise for these muscles, to strengthen these neck muscles as well, to be able to do that. So there are lots of little things that we automatically do with our babies that we don't even think that this is something that's really useful, but it is. So it's like an instinctive thing to think, you know, if you have your baby on the tummy for some tummy exercise or tummy time, or even if you're lying on your back and your baby is on your chest, that's also tummy exercises, because your baby is cuddling like this and then is going to start lifting the head to be able to look to the sides. Okay, so that is, you know, around about the 2-week mark, the 2-month mark. Then the baby grows older and is around about, I would say around about the 4-month mark is where one really starts seeing that the smiling comes very easy. These babies are super friendly. Okay, so if you come in, you have all smiles of your baby, even strangers at this point, you know, where babies will start really smiling. If there's just any kind of talking to babies, they do smile back, and there's this interaction forming. If we think about the vision at this point, babies at 4 months can still not see clear, but it is a gradual kind of increase that they can actually start seeing better. But the blur that they had initially is now not a complete blur. It is still, you know, there is a shape, but it's not, especially if you're standing further away, your baby knows it's you, but can't see you clearly. That blur basically starts to become better around about the 6-month mark. Okay, so at 4 months, definitely it's still, there's a shape, he knows it's you, but it's not that clear vision like you've got if you look at something that is a little bit further away. Okay, there's a lot of talking and babbling going on around for the language development here. Definitely the tongue has been found, lots of bubbles that are going to start, you know, your baby starting with all this, and this is all language development. If we think about talking, even while I'm talking, my tongue is doing all sorts of things in my mouth to be able to make the words that I'm talking. And this is something that your baby has to learn. So by playing, you know, if your baby is blowing bubbles and your baby is pushing the tongue out and just making sounds, this is really where language development starts. Okay, so that happens from early on. Okay, you'll also see your baby is going to definitely start noticing. If we think about the social development, your baby's going to start noticing different people, so he knows or she knows this is mom, this is dad, and gets very excited if you get closer. Okay, so that happens as well. If we think about you know, the movement and the gross motor development, definitely the neck that basically becomes really strong. If your baby's lying on the back and you hold the little arms, and you can start doing that from early as well, hold the little hands and just pull the hands up, and initially the head is actually gonna just flop back and come then to the front, where around about the 4-month mark, one actually thinks that, you know, the baby's actually getting very strong, and this head is actually started to be quite in control, that the baby is starting to keep that head much more stronger, you know, in this case, especially if you pull the baby up like that. Okay, then also what is a great thing to start playing in you know, with your baby is peekaboo. And we often do peekaboo automatically, and again, you know, it is such a useful little game to play, so that your baby can then you see your baby and then you don't, you know, so you basically do the peekaboo. And this is an ongoing game that you can start playing from a young age with your baby. And it's really great excitement, you know, if your baby starts to do that. Also, if we think about the 4-month mark, babies can start to really roll, and it often happens when they start around about the 3-month mark, really by pushing themselves up on a tummy time, and then by accident they actually roll over, and then figuring out. So you can really start playing with your baby. If your baby is on the back, hold the little feet and the legs, and then just by slightly turning your baby to the side, you know, and then just for the baby to get the feeling of how it feels to turn around. Okay, so that is something that is very useful to do. One can definitely every day set some time away, that you can say for the next 10 minutes, you're actually sitting on the floor or on the carpet or on the bed, somewhere where it's safe and it's nice for the baby to lie down, and you can interact with your baby, and you can do little movements with your baby, like the rolling. Okay, round about the 4-month mark, babies have figured out how to do this often. Some babies a little bit sooner, some babies a little bit later, and that is also important to remember, that for development, it's a gradual change, okay? And babies are very different. You'll actually only realize how different babies are in their development when the day you have your second, because that is where you realize that your second baby is doing things very different compared to the first one often. Okay, but definitely round about the 4-month mark is where the rolling actually would start taking place. You can also basically hold your baby, which is quite great at that point. You hold your baby like this, and you just put the baby's feet on a flat surface or on your lap or on the bed, and you'll start noticing your baby's definitely starting to take more weight. Obviously, your baby can't stand on its own, but it's by taking weight on the legs, which actually starts happening then. Okay, it's also great if we think like, what can you do? Because babies start to be a little bit more awake. And I find a lot of moms now, the question is, you're so used to your baby feeding and then sleeping. Now then suddenly, if your baby has these long awake times, what now? What am I supposed to do? And remember, anything that you do is like good for the baby. If you walk into a room and it was dark and you switch on that light, we expect that. But for a baby, you know, it's something like amazing that just happened. You know, the light actually just went on. So anything is really stimulation to your baby. If you switch on the light, if you go outside and there's a little breeze of the baby and you know that the baby feels wind, that already is also stimulation. If you talk to your baby, if you sing to your baby, and definitely by 4 months, if you haven't done it already before, I would advise you to really start singing songs to your baby. Again, interaction, eye contact is the important thing, where you would actually make contact with eye contact and then start singing songs or nursery rhymes to your baby. And also here is a good idea to have the little booklets. Okay, so if you have your reading books for your baby or baby reading books, and you can show the reading, you know, that you can show the pages to your baby. Remember, your baby won't, especially at that age, does not really understand what you're showing. It's more the action of doing it, and then you're doing it from a young age that baby grows into being quite aware of reading time and looking at the pictures and your voice, you know, your kind of voice and how you actually say something. So it's very important to have this kind of interaction with your baby from a young stage. Okay, then a very interesting time is round about the 6-month mark, where it's half a year. Okay, and it's actually unbelievable how quickly that really actually happens. And if we think about half a year or 6 months, babies become a lot stronger at this point. This is often the stage where babies are able to start sitting on their own. Some babies again might be already sitting by 6 months, and others really accomplish that like really well around about the 7-month mark. But so I would say around about the 6 month is where babies can start figuring out, this is something that I might be able to do. And this is, again, you have to have your baby often in an environment for development to happen. It doesn't help if you always just have your baby in your arms. You have to also at some point be able to say, now let's sit on the floor. This is the best place for a parent actually, is to sit on the floor with your baby. And you can have your baby sitting in between your legs, for example, so your legs are really supporting the baby, because initially, you know, there is a bit of movement to the side. So if you secure your baby, you know, your baby can actually learn to sit with support from the outside. So sitting is a big thing round about the 6-month mark. And this is also, once you have a baby sitting really nicely, this is a really good time. And moms feel really happy about that time as well, because it becomes easier in the sense that you can put your baby down, you put toys around, and your baby's actually happy to just play a little bit or just sit there and entertain himself and see mom as well, obviously. Then obviously talking about seeing, this is the time that we really think around about the 6-month mark, where babies can really see well. Okay, so now is the time that if you have your baby sitting on the floor and he's playing, that he can spot you if you're standing a little bit further away. He knows exactly, this is my mom, and he can actually see you quite clearly. Okay, so that is roundabout. So it takes about roughly 6 months to really develop well. Okay, so then also if we think about language development, this is a very loud time with lots of babbling. There's a lot of sounds being made, lots of consonants, even like b or m, mama, 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 all these kind of ba 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 ba, or da 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 da, all these kind of sounds that baby suddenly starts to make. And again, it's that tongue that is really practicing all these different things, how to and what to do to be able to form words later on. Okay, so that is really an important time to, again, interact with your baby, make a sound, you know, and then sometimes it's even a good idea to mimic your baby. So whatever your baby's doing with the sound, repeat that, you know, or a facial expression, you know, expression of your baby, repeat that and do that, you know, and show your baby this interaction that you're actually doing with your baby. So that's really very good. Cognitive, definitely starting to become a little bit more clever. They know who's mom, they know who's dad. They start to be aware that there are other people that they don't know. So a lot of people do find that babies start to not like to go to certain people, you know, so specifically if it's strangers. And that's also something for a baby to learn, okay, that it's not always just mom and dad, that there are actually other people around as well. And that as they grow older, it's, you know, it develops. Okay, with the movement, again, you know, it's like I said before, the sitting, and then normally by 6 months we expect the baby to be able to roll over, and even both sides. And if your baby's not rolling over at this point, don't worry too much. Just practice this with your baby. You know, your baby, needs practicing. Anything that we do, you need practice for that. So you have to practice something to be able to get good in something. And this is the same thing with our baby's development. This is really the time to have your baby on the floor often. I often find that babies are placed in things even later on, and even sometimes from early on, like a walking ring and things like that, or something that your baby can sit in for a bouncer and so on. And that's all good and well, but it's so much better for a baby to be actually on the floor, because that is the time when they really have the time then to practice all these skills that they need, like the rolling. If he's never in a position to learn to roll, he will not roll, you know, so he has to be on the floor to be able to roll, and you can play with him to do that. So by 6 months, if your baby's not rolling, often sit on the floor with him, you know, help him, show him what it feels like, you know, so you roll him that it feels like that he can feel. This is what it feels like. You can even put some toys out of reach so that he can try to go for that. Okay, something that is also a clever thing to play with is if you have a big exercise balls, these yoga balls, a big exercise. I tend to talk about a birth ball, but so it's all the same thing. It's one of these big balls that you can sit on. So you can take that at 6 months, and it's very fun, you know, it's really fun stuff for baby. If you put the baby on the tummy over the ball, so the baby's like lying like this over the ball, and you can rock the baby. So that movement, and even by going slightly upside down, is really good for the baby to figure out this is what it feels like. It feels so different, and it's really enjoyable. And if you see your baby starting to enjoy this, you can put some toys, favorite toys, on the floor, and you just hold the feet and you can roll the baby over the ball in that direction, and it makes for great fun and games, you know, that you can do with your baby. So just have a look around, things that are around the house. What can you use to play with, you know, and to make it very fun, you know, really fun for the baby. Okay, so if we go on and your baby grows and develops further, and round about the 9-month mark is where the movement normally starts. So normally, if we think about the big movements or the big things, is the 6-month sitting, 9-month crawling. Okay, and this is also not that the one day he can't crawl and the next day he can crawl. It's a process of getting into that. And again, I have to point out, your baby has to be on the floor for them to learn this. Okay, if your baby is never on the floor, you will not have a baby that really crawls. Okay, so, and it's really important, if we think about crawling, we do recommend that crawling is a very important thing, a skill to learn for a baby. Also, if we think about the curve of the back of a newborn, you know, the curve of the back is more like a C shape. And if you think about an adult's back, it is an S shape. And the time where that really grows into that proper shape is when you're on your hands and knees. So crawling is exceptionally important. So it's really important to be on the floor often. If you do have a walking ring, this is the time I would say you pack away the walking ring. Do not have it close by, because you want your baby to encourage your baby to be more on the floor. Okay, so this is where they often, with crawling specifically, they slide backwards first, you know, and then by figuring out, and a lot of babies do leopard crawls. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how your baby starts crawling, it's by figuring out that the brain can think, what can I do to get somewhere? So you can have some toys just out of reach that your baby really wants to get to, and it's by trying to see how can your baby get to that. So often it is a funny kind of a leopard crawl thing that goes on there, and then eventually getting into the position with a bum in the air with straight legs, you know, figuring out, how do I get into this position of being on my knees and on my hands? So it's a whole process of development, and that's really important. Okay, then you actually have where the crawling properly starts. Some babies have this one leg that comes out, and really at the end of the day, again, it doesn't matter how you do this, but eventually they will all eventually crawl well. But it is an important thing to accomplish and to learn how to do this. Okay, so the crawling is very important. Another fun fact here with the crawling is that we know if a baby's crawling, especially the little hands, there are so many things that the baby touches. So depending on what kind of surface the baby's crawling, it's like, let's say if it's carpet, and then it's cement, and then it's perhaps wood, grass, whatever, this constant change on the little hands, you know, the different texture that it feels, you know, on the hands, that actually has to do with the brain development in your brain that has to do with maths later. So if we think about school, and if you think about the maths later and so on, you're already helping your baby develop that part in the brain just by allowing your baby to crawl. Okay, so it is important to have your baby on the floor often. Okay, so that's round about the 9-month mark where they do those kind of big things. Okay, now also social, your baby might start to become very clingy, and this is sometimes exhausting to moms and dads. You know, baby wants to just have, especially the mom, it's like, feels like a magnet. You can't put your baby down, especially if you're somewhere else. Baby does not want any other people, is definitely starting to be aware of strangers. Okay, so it is an important time also where that develops. But again, lots of talking, lots of interaction that needs to take place here. So lots of little games and singing songs and reading books, all these kind of things. And then also for the language, it's these sounds that your baby's making, is to basically learn how to speak. So these, it's usually just like a mama, 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 all those kind of sounds that become words later, closer to 12 months, at a year. Normally you actually have a proper, like perhaps mama or dada, that it actually means something. But initially, around about the 9-month mark, it's usually just unspecific sounds, but that is where it learns, your baby learns how to do this. You might even say a sound and then your baby repeats a sound. So it's lots of repetition. So it's really fun and games having a baby, actually. So another thing that you might start noticing is that your baby starts to notice and to take note of the word no. So if you say no, you might see your baby does, you know, let's say if your baby crawls somewhere and wants to touch something and you say no, you know, you might actually see your baby just wondering a little bit and wondering about that. Can I or can't I do this? So there's definitely recognition of certain words like no. Okay, but remember, again, if I say no, you have to say yes as well. And I think just by being very conscious of constantly also have like good things and talking and interaction, and tell your baby, fantastic, yes, you know, we want to raise our children with a lot of the good sounds and the good words, okay, positivity, okay. And we tend to forget that, you know, and we often just, you know is such an important word that they all know very quickly, because things can be dangerous, but it is important to actually bring the yes in as well. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Okay, with movement here at 9 months, often you have, obviously with the crawling, they can actually sometimes start to, from this age, start pulling themselves up. It's obviously a time where lots of bumps and bruises happen, because that comes together with perhaps falling over. And so that is something that happens at this stage as well. But definitely standing up, pulling herself up, so that in the standing position and actually holding, and then pulling, and just by standing and just holding, and the legs are quite strong, and being very proud of herself if that actually happened, if your baby did this. Okay, so that's around about the 12-month, the 9-month mark, and then getting closer to 12 months, and 12 months is where this pulling up, standing, eventually like letting go, and then holding on again, letting go, and eventually be able to actually start to be able to walk. Okay, so that is round about the 12-month mark. Okay, so I hope that the first 12 months actually gave you some ideas like what you can do, that you also know what to expect at the beginning. Remember, this is really social interaction, being aware, contact, eye contact, things like that, very important from birth, that you actually interact with your baby.